The line outside the Ed Sullivan Theater stretched around the block, as it did every Tuesday evening. 200 people waiting to see The Late Show with David Letterman, each clutching their tickets like golden passes to somewhere magical. Among them stood Daniel Wright, 24 years old, wearing a gray hoodie, despite the warm September evening, his hands buried deep in his pockets. Next to him, Amy Chen held his arm gently, protectively. They'd been dating for 8 months, but she'd known him for 3 years, since before Iraq, before the explosion, before the hands disappeared. She'd watched him retreat from the world, watched laughter die in a man who used to light up every room he entered. "You don't have to do this," Daniel said quietly, his eyes on the pavement. "Yes, I do," Amy replied, "and so do you. When was the last time you laughed? Really laughed?" Daniel didn't answer because he couldn't remember. They'd met at a VA support group. Amy was a volunteer counselor. Daniel was a mandatory attendee. Marines, his discharge paper said. Honorable discharge after an IED took both hands below the wrist. The prosthetics were state-of-the-art, controlled by muscle impulses capable of incredible precision. He could hold a coffee cup, type on a keyboard, even tie his shoes with practice, but he couldn't clap. The prosthetics could mimic many natural hand movements, but the quick, repeated percussion of applause was beyond their design. It was a small thing, really, insignificant compared to everything else he'd lost. Except it wasn't. It meant sitting silent at his nephew's piano recital while everyone else applauded. It meant frozen stillness at his sister's wedding when the couple kissed. It meant being a spectator to joy instead of a participant in it. "They're letting us in," Amy said, squeezing his arm. The theater was magnificent. Red seats cascading down toward a stage that glowed with warmth and possibility. The audience buzzed with excitement. That particular energy of people about to witness something live, something real. An usher guided them to their seats. Front row, center. Daniel's stomach dropped. "Amy, these seats." "I pulled some strings," she said, smiling. "You deserve to be close, to really experience it." They sat. Daniel kept his hands on his thighs, the prosthetics covered by his hoodie sleeves. Around them, people chattered, laughed, took photos. The warm-up comedian came out working the crowd. People clapped. Daniel sat still. Then the lights dimmed. The band struck up the opening music. And David Letterman walked onto that stage like he'd done thousands of times before, but Daniel felt like he was seeing it for the first time. The man was real, three-dimensional, human. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." David's voice filled the theater. The audience erupted. Applause thundered through the space. Daniel smiled, genuinely smiled at the energy, but his hands stayed on his lap. David launched into his monologue. Political jokes, celebrity gossip, observational humor delivered with that sideways grin and perfectly timed pauses. The audience laughed, applauded, laughed more. Daniel found himself laughing too, real laughter that surprised him with its presence. Amy squeezed his arm, and he could feel her relief. But then camera 2 swung toward the audience for a reaction shot. The operator was capturing the front row's response to a particularly good joke. The monitor in the control room showed the footage clearly. People laughing, clapping, a young man in the center with a genuine smile, but hands that didn't move. David, trained by decades of reading audiences, caught the image on his return monitor. Just a flash, but enough. Young guy, front row, laughing but not clapping. He filed it away in that mental catalog performers keep, the one that tracks energy and response. The monologue continued. More jokes, more applause. Daniel's smile never wavered, but his stillness became more noticeable. Not to the audience around him. They were too caught up in the show, but to the cameras that kept finding him and to David, who had developed an instinct for noticing things that didn't fit the pattern. During the commercial break, David stepped to the side of the stage where his producer stood with a headset. "That young man in the front row," David said, pointing discreetly. "Center. Gray hoodie. What's his story?" The producer, Karen, followed his gaze. "I'll find out." She dispatched a production assistant who moved through the audience during the break, whispered conversation with Amy. A nod. The PA returned as they were coming back from commercial. His name is Daniel Wright, Karen said into David's earpiece. Iraq veteran, lost both hands in 2019. That's his girlfriend, Amy. She's a VA counselor. This is their first time doing anything social in months. David absorbed this information as the band played him back to his mark. The next segment was an interview with an actress promoting her new film. Professional, charming, easy. But David's mind was elsewhere, working through an idea that was forming with each passing minute. The interview ended. Commercial break. David made a decision. Change the rundown, he told Karen. What? After this break, before the next guest, I need 3 minutes. Trust me. Karen had worked with David long enough to know that tone. She signaled the control room. They'd figure it out. The show came back from commercial. David didn't go to the next guest introduction. Instead, he stood at center stage, his expression different now. More serious, more present. Folks, I want to do something a little different, he began. The audience quieted, sensing the shift. I've been doing this show for a long time, and one of the things you learn when you perform in front of people every night is to read the room, to notice things. He paused, then looked directly at Daniel. Sir, in the gray hoodie, front row center, I've noticed something tonight. You've been laughing, and I appreciate that genuinely, but you haven't clapped once. Not once. And I'm guessing there's a reason. Every eye in the theater turned to Daniel. Amy's hand tightened on his arm. Daniel felt his face flush, his chest tighten. This was exactly what he'd feared, why he'd avoided public spaces for so long. Being seen, being noticed, being different. Would you mind coming up here for a second? David's voice was gentle, not demanding. An invitation, not a command. Daniel looked at Amy. She nodded, tears already forming in her eyes. He stood slowly, and as he did, his sleeves rode up slightly, revealing the edge of the prosthetics. The walk to the stage felt like miles. The steps up felt like mountains. And then he was there, standing next to David Letterman on the Late Show stage, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might break through his chest. What's your name? David asked. Daniel Wright. Daniel, thank you for coming up here. I know this probably isn't what you signed up for tonight. David's voice was warm, conversational. I noticed you weren't clapping, and then I noticed why. Would you mind showing everyone? Daniel hesitated. This was the moment of exposure, the moment of vulnerability that he'd been avoiding for 5 years, but something in David's face, not pity, not curiosity, but genuine respect, made him brave. He pulled his hands from his pockets and held up the prosthetics. The audience gasped softly. Under the stage lights, the mechanical nature was obvious. The articulated fingers, the visible joints, the slight mechanical movement. Military? David asked. Marines, sir, Iraq, 2019. IED? Yes, sir. David nodded slowly. And you came here tonight to laugh? Yes, sir. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. Haven't done much of that lately. I noticed you were laughing during the monologue. Was I funny? A small smile broke through Daniel's tension. Yes, sir. You were funny. David turned to face the audience fully now, and when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that everyone in that theater felt. Folks, I want to tell you something. Applause is easy. We do it without thinking. Someone says something we like, we clap. Someone does something impressive, we clap. It's automatic. It's expected, it's noise. He paused, letting that sink in. But laughter? Real laughter? That's different. That comes from somewhere deeper. You can fake applause, but you can't fake a real laugh. And this young man here, Daniel, he came to this show tonight not to applaud. He physically can't, but to laugh, to feel joy, to remember what that's like. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. So here's what I want to do, David continued. For the rest of tonight's show, I don't want anyone to clap, not once. Don't applaud the guests, don't applaud the band, don't applaud me, just laugh. When something's funny, really laugh. When something moves you, show it on your face. When something connects, let it connect. He turned back to Daniel. Because tonight, we're performing for someone who's reminded us what applause really costs and what laughter really means. Daniel, would you do us the honor of staying up here? I want you to sit right there. He gestured to a chair they quickly brought out. So I can see you. So when I say something, I know if it's actually funny because you'll laugh or you won't. And you can't fake it. Will you do that? Daniel, overwhelmed, could only nod. They positioned the chair stage right, visible but not intrusive. Daniel sat, his prosthetic hands resting on his knees, and Amy in the audience was openly crying now. The show continued. The next guest came out, a comedian promoting his new special. Normally, his entrance would have been accompanied by applause. Instead, the audience smiled. Some waved, and there was this strange, beautiful silence that somehow felt more welcoming than noise. The comedian, briefed quickly during his walk-on, adapted instantly. He played to the silence, leaned into it. His jokes landed not with applause, but with genuine laughter. Rolling, uncontrolled laughter that filled the space more richly than clapping ever could. Every few minutes, David would glance at Daniel. Was that funny? And Daniel would nod or laugh or sometimes shake his head with a smile, and David would say, "Okay, I'll try harder." It became a conversation. The whole show became a conversation. Without applause to fill the spaces, there was more room for response. People called out reactions. They made sounds of surprise or delight. The band played more expressively, responding to the room's energy in real time. During the next commercial break, something remarkable was happening. Audience members were talking to each other, sharing their experience. "This feels different," someone said. "This feels real," another responded. The musical guest performed. Normally, the song would bookend with applause. Instead, it ended in silence, but a silence so full of appreciation that it was more powerful than any noise. Then, spontaneously, the audience began to sway, to move, to respond physically in ways that transcended clapping. Daniel watched it all from his chair. He'd been terrified when he walked up those steps. But now, sitting there, being the reason for this change, he felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. He felt necessary. He felt like his presence mattered, not despite his difference, but because of it. The final segment came. David brought out his last scheduled guest, wrapped up the interview, and then, as the show was about to close, he stood center stage once more. "Daniel, would you come stand with me?" Daniel walked over. The cameras captured them side by side, and the veteran and the host, both finding themselves in unexpected territory. "Tonight we did something different," David said. "We took away applause. And you know what we found? We found something better. We found authentic response. We found real connection. We found that the sound of genuine laughter matters more than the noise of obligatory clapping." He turned to Daniel. "You came here thinking you couldn't participate. But you gave us the greatest gift anyone could give a performer. You gave us honesty. When you laughed, we knew it was real. When you smiled, we knew it mattered. Thank you for that." David extended his hand, then caught himself, smiled ruefully, and instead reached out and gripped Daniel's shoulder. "Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. And thank you for reminding us what really matters." The audience instinctively began to applaud, then caught themselves. Instead, they rose to their feet in silence. 200 people standing, not clapping, but showing respect and stillness. Some had tears streaming down their faces. Others smiled so broadly it hurt. And in that silence, in that moment of collective respect, Daniel felt something break open in his chest. He was crying. He hadn't cried since the hospital, since the moment he woke up and saw the stumps where his hands used to be. But now, standing on national television, he cried. And he didn't hide it. After the show ended, after the audience had filed out still buzzing with the experience, Daniel and Amy found themselves backstage. David was there, out of his jacket now, looking tired but satisfied. "That was incredible," Amy said, still holding Daniel's arm. "Thank you doesn't seem like enough." "You don't have to thank me," David said. "Daniel did all the hard work. I just noticed." "What made you notice?" Daniel asked. His voice was steadier now, grounded. David considered the question. "Honestly, I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've seen thousands of audiences, and somewhere along the way, it became about the noise, the applause, the ratings, the validation. But tonight, when I saw you laughing but not clapping, it reminded me what I'd forgotten. That comedy isn't about the sound people make afterward. It's about the connection in the moment. You laughing with no hands to clap, that's pure. That's real. That's what this job should be about." He paused. "Also, I'm tired of fake applause. Celebrity guests whose publicists tell their friends to clap loudly. Audience members who clap because they think they should, not because they want to. Tonight, nobody could hide behind noise. Tonight, it was all real." 3 days later, the episode aired. The network was nervous about the no applause gimmick. Would it play on television? Would viewers understand? They didn't need to worry. The episode went viral within hours. Not just viral, it became a phenomenon. No applause, just laughter trended worldwide. Veterans organizations shared it. Disability rights groups championed it. But more than that, regular people shared it. With a simple message: this is what connection looks like. Talk shows started experimenting with applause-free segments. Comedy clubs held special silent response nights. The conversation shifted from how do we get louder to how do we get realer. Daniel's life changed too. He gave an interview to a veterans magazine, then a national morning show. He didn't become famous exactly, but he became visible in a way that mattered. He started volunteering at the VA, talking to other vets about visibility and vulnerability, about how sometimes the thing you think makes you broken is actually what makes you real. 6 months after the episode aired, Daniel received a package. Inside was a framed photo from that night, him and David on stage, the silent standing ovation happening around them. There was a note in David's handwriting: "Daniel." "This photo sits on my desk now. It reminds me why I do this job. Not for applause, for connection. Thank you for teaching an old host a new truth. You're always welcome in the front row." "Dave." Daniel hung it in his living room. And sometimes when he looked at it, he remembered that night, remembered being terrified to be seen, then choosing to be seen anyway, remembered learning that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only path to real connection. A year later, Daniel and Amy got married. At the reception, there was a moment of silence before the first dance. No applause, just 200 people standing quietly, showing love through presence instead of noise. Some guests didn't understand at first, but then someone explained, and the story spread through the room. No applause, just laughter became a phrase Daniel and Amy used in their life together. When things were hard, when the prosthetics malfunctioned, when phantom pain made sleep impossible, when the world felt too heavy, they'd remind each other. No applause needed, just real response, just authentic presence. Just showing up as you are, broken parts and all. David kept his word. Whenever Daniel was in New York, there were tickets waiting at will call. Front row, center. And Daniel went. Not every time, but often enough. He'd sit in that seat and laugh when things were funny, and sit in silent appreciation when things moved him. And David would glance over occasionally, checking. "Was that funny?" his look would say. And Daniel's laugh would answer. Because that's what the night had taught them both. That performance isn't about the noise that comes after, it's about the connection that happens during. That applause is easy, but laughter is earned. That silence can be more powerful than sound. That being seen in your brokenness is scarier than staying hidden, but it's also the only way to be truly whole. The network tried to replicate the no applause experiment several times. It never quite worked the same way, because it wasn't about the gimmick, it was about the moment. It was about a veteran who couldn't clap teaching. A theater full of people that applause was never the point. The point was joy. Real, earned, honest joy, the kind that comes from deep laughter, from genuine surprise, from authentic connection, the kind that doesn't need hands to express itself, the kind that doesn't need noise to prove its existence, the kind that happens when someone finally feels safe enough to be seen. That night, an audience member who couldn't clap changed television. Not because of what he couldn't do, but because of what he could. Laugh honestly, respond authentically, and remind everyone watching that the best moments in life aren't the ones we applaud. They're the ones we feel.